On the 17th of March, 2000, the hills of Kanungu, Uganda, were engulfed in flames. Hundreds of followers of a secretive religious movement perished, not in devotion, but in deception.
After apocalyptic fire consumed a church in the deeper recesses of western Uganda, killing hundreds of believers, police has tabled a report into the findings of the Kanungu massacre. On March 17, 2000, believers of the movement of the restoration of the Ten Commandments cult were told they were going to heaven, only to be incinerated in the church dosed by petrol.
To the world, it was a mystery. To survivors, it was betrayal. At the center of it all, a man named Joseph Kibwetere.
The Inspector General of Police, General Kale Kayihura, told lawmakers on the Committee of Defense and Internal Affairs that police and Interpol have since then failed to track the whereabouts of Joseph Kibwetere and other leaders who were believed to have escaped to the Malawi through Tanzania.
Who was this man? How did he lead hundreds into the flames? And why does no one know what truly happened to him? Was it suicide or murder? Where did Kibwetere go? Joseph Kibwetere was one of the leaders of the movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments of God, a doomsday cult that believed the world would come to an end at the turn of the millennium. The group split from the Catholic Church in Uganda and became infamous after 778 of its members were found dead. He is believed to have been born in 1932 in Kishariro, Ntungamo District, Uganda. Little is known about his early childhood life, but some sources claim that he attended the Catholic secondary school in Nyamitanga, Mbarara town. There, he was seen as very able and social, and made many friends and social connections. In 1955, he joined the St. George's Teacher Training College in Ibanda. It is argued that by this time in his career, he had become very well known amongst the Ugandan Catholic hierarchy and also in the teaching hierarchy. By 1956, he had been promoted to headmaster at his first post at Rushoka Primary School. From there, promoted to headmaster at the Kishariro Primary School, before becoming the assistant supervisor for Catholic schools in his region in 1959. He married Teresa Kuribakanya, a secretary for the Uganda Land Commission, in 1960, and they went on to have 8 children. By 1963, Kibwetere was one of the wealthiest and influential men in Catholic education in the country. He ran for political office in 1980 and owned enough land to donate some land for a school of his own design.
I was a religious man, very religious Catholic man. I think he tried politics. He had failed in politics. I think there's a history that he had a mental illness. He had never been admitted in the psychiatric hospital.
During his life, Uganda experienced both religious and political upheaval, which likely influenced him. The most significant of these influences might have been religious movements that focused on miracles and Marian apparitions. In 1984, he claimed to have seen visions of the Virgin Mary, which Credonia Mwerinde, who was 32, reportedly brought to him. According to some sources, before founding the movement, Credonia is said to have been a shopkeeper, brewer of banana beer, and a prostitute, though none of these claims could be verified.
Credonia was very enterprising by nature. She didn't have much luck in love, so she started a bar. The bar failed. Then she returned to her father's home, where she established the church where the inferno happened.
There are several different accounts of how the movement was founded. However, what stands out is that the movement was founded after Joseph met Credonia, who was also a member of a religious group devoted to the Virgin Mary. She and 2 other group members approached Joseph Kibwetere in 1989 and said that the Virgin Mary had instructed him to take them in. Kibwetere did, and he was particularly struck by Credonia's claim of a Marian apparition near his home, which related to a vision he himself had 5 years earlier. Together, Mwerinde and Kibwetere would found the movement in 1989, which they named the Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God.
Mwirinde used to invite us as her kinsmen to parties at the church, and we were eating and drinking. But we could also see children looking at us through the windows, and they were begging for food from us, and they obviously were suffering.
Mwirinde, together with Kibwetere and Dominic Kataraba-Abo, an excommunicated priest, led the movement. However, Paul Ikazire, a sect leader who later returned to the Catholic Church, described Credonia as the true power in the movement, and Kibwetere was merely a figurehead meant to impose masculine authority over the followers and enhance the cult's public image. It is said that she was also the source of the sect's predictions of an apocalypse, and the pronouncements that salvation could only be found with the Virgin Mary's messages. After the movement's foundation, word of Kibwetere and his religion spread across southwest Uganda and beyond. The community was not closed off from the rest of society, and several people in positions of authority, including policemen and local government officials, were aware of its activities. But little action was taken against the cult before the Inferno. By the early 1990s, the movement had grown rapidly, and at its height, membership was estimated to be between 5,000 and 6,000. The faithful had been drawn by the charismatic leaders Credonia Mwirinde, a former bartender and sex worker, and ex-government employee Joseph Kibwetere. In the 1990s, the movement strongly emphasized apocalypticism in its booklet, A Timely Message from Heaven, The End of the Present Time. It is claimed that the group declared several dates upon which the end of the world would arrive. However, several of these dates came and went with no sign of an apocalypse. The apocalypse was predicted to occur with the advent of the new millennium. It is said that the movement strongly embraced Christian icons that were prominent in the movement's compound, and the cult had tenuous links to Roman Catholicism, with its leadership dominated by several defrocked priests and nuns, including Ursula Komuhangi and Dominic Kataribabo. Believers lived mostly in silence, occasionally using signs to communicate. Various sources claim that questions would be sent to Credonia in writing. Known as the Programmer, she is said to have been the mastermind behind how the establishment run, and would write back with answers. One former member is quoted as saying, "We did everything possible to avoid sin. Sometimes if you sinned, they would command you to recite the rosary 1,000 times. You had to do it, and also ask friends and family to help until you had served your punishment." She further explained that life rotated around prayer, although they also farmed. It seemed like Credonia and Ursula were aware of every sin that had been committed in the far-flung outlets of the church. When a follower broke the rules, the two women would shed tears of blood, said a former member of the cult. Devotion to the movement regularly involved pilgrimage to a steep, rocky hill nearby. After a tough hike through a eucalyptus forest, hanging onto rocks and grabbing at tufts of grass, the faithful would reach a rock that they believed depicted the Virgin Mary. After the movement was evicted from Ruwashamair, it moved to an estate Credonia's father owned in Kanungu district. According to a report compiled by researchers from Makerere University's Department of Religious Studies, the movement's leaders had predicted the end of the world on the 31st of December 1999. The report also says, prior to this, darkness was to cover the world for 3 days from the 29th of December. Once the world came to an end, only cult members gathered at their camp would be saved. With the year 2000 approaching, sect members sold their property and turned the profits over to the group's leadership. When the world did not end on the 1st of January, a crisis occurred in the movement. Members began to ask questions and demand the return of their money and property. A chaotic situation developed in the camp as the golden rule of silence was broken. All work was stopped, and members became disloyal and started to mix freely with outsiders. Police investigators believe that movement leadership, particularly Credonia, began a purge of their followers, culminating in the destruction of their Kanungu church on the 17th of March 2000, in a fire that killed over 500 people inside.
We were told that they would hold meetings at night. They would poison, they would use poison. I think they would even balloon people, hit them on the head and fall in pits. So they started killing, because even we visited mass graves. Actually, some mass graves were never evacuated, never exhumed. So they started killing members at the different church sites. And then there was this final inferno where the people were said to have, where the leaders said people were going to go into an ark which was going to take them to heaven through fire.
Tension builds. Members sell their last belongings, fast again, and prepare for the final day. The leaders promised a new journey to heaven. This time in March 2000. With all the chaos caused by the failed prophecy, the leaders of the cult told their followers that the Virgin Mary had reappeared to them and extended the date for the end of the world, a report revealed. As the end of the world grew increasingly elusive, members were asked to go back to their homes and told they would be informed when to return to be taken to heaven. Later, the leaders spread the word that the Virgin Mary had extended the date by 2 months, to the 17th of March 2000. In March 2000, just a week before the massacre, the group began slaughtering cattle and buying massive amounts of Coca-Cola. These events did not initially raise an alarm. They were preparing for a feast before death, referred to as the Last Supper. Members from the cult's other camps were also brought to Kanungu to participate in the celebrations. 17th of March 2000 was just a normal day like any other. With members entering the old church for morning prayers, they were told that they would be locked in and that the Virgin Mary would come personally, clothed in flames, to take them to heaven. The pretext for locking them inside the church was that only those inside would be delivered. At this moment, the doors were nailed shut. For many Ugandans, the tragedy remains an open wound.
My wife went to Kanungu in January 2000 and spent a weekend there with the children, then returned to ask that we get married formally because she wanted to return to Kanungu and not live in sin. I told her that given the years we had spent together, there was no way I wouldn't marry her, but she had abandoned our home and she left for Kanungu.
Survivors speak of betrayal, of how their faith was twisted into a weapon. The Kanungu massacre became a global warning about the dangers of cult fanaticism, blind faith, and unchecked spiritual power.
They congregated into this hall and locked themselves in, and all that the witnesses could see was smoke and a blast and fire. The place was set ablaze.
Initially believed to be a mass suicide, the police later stated that they were investigating it as a mass murder when hundreds of bodies were found at the movement's properties across southwestern Uganda and other parts of the country. The BBC reported that Kibwetere had been treated for bipolar disorder a year or so before the group's suicide. Although Kibwetere was assumed to have died in the incident, rumors say he and Credonia fled to Rwanda or Congo. The Ugandan police shortly afterwards issued a warrant for arrest against the other leaders of the group.
98, he's in Butabika. In fact, he was supposed to go back to Butabika for diagnosis. He did not go back, like review, yeah. So he went, stayed there for some time, they released him and was supposed to come back for review. He never returned.
In 2014, it was announced by the Uganda National Police that there were reports that Kibwetere was hiding in Malawi.
It was not very clear whether Mwerinde died in that inferno, but all likelihood is that she probably was also in that inferno.
It has been 25 years since the massacre, and nothing is known about the cult leader's whereabouts. A member of Kibwetere's family stated that the leader's actions had been entirely influenced by Credonia Mwerinde. Kibwetere promised his followers salvation. Instead, he led them into the flames. 2 decades later, Kanungu still burns in Uganda's memory, a warning of what happens when devotion turns into destruction.